Hey YouTube, Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. In this one, we are going to be discussing the 2023 hurricane season outlook here. Colorado State recently put their outlook in a couple of days ago, or actually a little bit longer than that now, about 3 or 4 days. But between that, the Weather Channel's outlook, and also NOAA itself, we now have our number of named storms, how it compares to the 30-year average, and more. Also, we'll take a quick look at the environment heading into hurricane season because this is going to be pretty telling. So, buckle up because this might be a long video. I'm going to try to keep it short. Also, one thing that I want to make mention of right before I get into the meat of the video is the fact that the number of named storms, that doesn't necessarily matter. This does not include where we could see any sort of landfall, any sort of hurricane strikes. So even if the numbers do not impress you, remember 2022 wasn't an active year, and we had two major storms. We had Fiona and we had Ian, two very damaging storms. So it only really takes one to be remembered. In fact, a great example would be the year that Hurricane Andrew hit. Andrew was, of course, an A-named storm, so that was the first tropical storm of that year, and look what it did. So, plenty of great examples to remind you that just because you may see an average, below average, above average year does not guarantee that we will have a catastrophic season, or doesn't guarantee that we won't have one. So, preparation still is all the same, regardless of the numbers. That being said, let's get into the video. So, starting out, and this is not the screen I wanted, here we go. Starting out, this is what we're looking at as far as numbers for this season. We're actually right on the ball here. We're right on average. So 14 storms. In fact, last year was right at average. In fact, if I remember correctly, 2022 was originally forecast to be a pretty active year, but a pattern was set up over the early part of the season and into the middle part even that made tropical development very difficult. Now, there are some factors that may make these numbers fluctuate, and we could see either an above or below average season. But nonetheless, we're so far looking at an average number of storms. The average is 14.4, by the way. We're seeing between 13 and 50 split between the Weather Channel and both Colorado State. Same thing with hurricanes. The average is about 7. Colorado State has 6. Weather Channel has 7. And then major hurricanes, about 3 is what we would be expecting as an average year. And that's exactly what we're seeing between Weather Company and Colorado State. Colorado State being a little bit less. But again, there's a couple of factors that come into play here. Also, before we get into that, here are all the names. Arlene, Brett, Cindy, Don, Emily, Franklin, Gert, Harold, Idalia, Jose, Katia, Lee, Margaret, Nigel. Why? I was about to call it Mitchell. Ophelia, Felipe, Rena, Sean, Tammy, Vince, and Whitney. Names in the magenta or pink, whichever one you want to call it, are the new names replacing Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Nate from 2017. Excuse me. So one of the signals there that could really affect this hurricane season is the Enzo pattern. And really, that's actually all the way over towards the Pacific Ocean. Over the last 3 years straight, we've been in what's called a La Nina pattern, where waters over the Pacific towards the surface and just below were cooler than average. And at times that can create a setup that will aid hurricane development over here in the Atlantic. But that has since ended now, and we're starting to shift into what's called an El Nino pattern, where the ocean waters over the Pacific will start to warm. In fact, there's a pretty high confidence that an El Nino will be in place for hurricane season, over 61% actually. Now, there is a couple other factors that we need to keep a close eye on, and that's the recurve pattern. This is part of what will protect the lower 48 here, and sometimes even will protect these islands over here as well towards the Caribbean. And that's whenever we get this little recurve pattern here. These storms will form just a little further north of Cape Verde here. And what will end up happening is this high pressure here will be set up. The storm will revolve around that, get caught in the clockwise flow, and off to the sea it goes, and we'll probably never even see or hear about it ever again after that. So there is one thing to keep a note of as well, is that El Nino tends to produce less storms in the Gulf. And El Nino also has a tendency of having this setup in place. So maybe we could see a slightly below average season, or maybe a less impactful one. But one other thing to make note of, and this will have the opposite effect, is the fact that the ocean temperatures are very warm right now across the entire Atlantic. But across the Atlantic and the Gulf, temperatures are very warm. Usually what we see during this time of year is usually pretty telling of what we'll get for hurricane season, and for the most part, we're above average on all fronts here. Of at least maybe 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. Nothing like last year where the Gulf was an absolute hotbed, but still pretty warm still. So this isn't like we're not going to get any storms. The pattern might make it a little bit more difficult. So, that being said, in comparison to years like 2020, again, numbers aren't going to be that impressive, but as we said before in the video, that's not necessarily going to matter. One storm is all it takes. And if we get one, it still needs to be watched, and updates will be on this channel as needed. So, now that we've looked at that, let's go ahead and look at what exactly is an El Nino watch, and then we'll go into what we're currently seeing right now over the Atlantic. So as I mentioned before, El Nino, La Nina basically have to do with ocean surf or below surface temperatures in the Pacific towards the equator. Here is a graph that indicates what we had over the last 3 years. This was a La Nina pattern from 2020 to 2023. And these little gray areas that are a little harder to see is every multi-year La Nina since 1950. Not very many of those. Put in perspective, 9 to 12 months is usually how long an Enso pattern will typically last, but this was an exception, of course. At times, La Nina was pretty strong, but now, as we started to head into March, we started to hit that neutral Enso pattern, and now we will start to shift into El Nino as we head into late spring and early summer. In fact, that's indicated here. These are all the months in the year shown in a 3-month time frame. This is where we are right now in March and April. Neutral Enso confidence is at 100%. But look, this area in the red here is the El Nino confidence. Watch what happens as we go from April, May, into June, which is our current time frame here. See that going up. It's at 30%. By the time we get into May, June, July, this goes up to 60. And then by June, July, and August, we're above 70% at this point. And the numbers continue to go up as we draw later and later into the year. This also has to be watched as well, because the El Nino pattern does a lot more than affect hurricanes. It affects all modes of weather. So this could affect our winter weather pattern. This could affect our severe weather pattern as we get into the summer. So again, a lot to be watched for here. So here, I'm going to show a graphic here that indicates the El Nino pattern beginning to take shape here. This area is warmer than average temperatures just below the surface here towards the equator around the Pacific. This is what an El Nino looks like. If it wasn't a La Nina, you'd see this in a color of blue now. So this could also be a moderately strong El Nino. This isn't going to necessarily be like an above average chance that occurs. But if the temperature does reach higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius, that is considered a strong El Nino. But that's a 4 in 10 chance as of right now. It's a little bit uncertain because trying to get a good gauge of that this early in the year is pretty difficult. We're probably going to have to wait another couple months for that. If you want me to do a video on that, feel free to let me know in the comments. So, again, this is another look at the ocean temperatures as a whole. Towards the coast around the Pacific, temperatures are a little bit cooler than average. Towards the equator, we're starting to see that heating up and beginning to develop. So that being said, that's pretty much the deal here as far as our setup currently. Wind pattern right now over the Atlantic is not conducive to tropical development, so there's no concern right now. And there's no graphical marine forecast to even be concerned with at any portion at the moment. So no real issues there. You can even see it right here as indicated by the this other graphic that I'm looking at currently. So that's what we're dealing with there. There's nothing over towards the Pacific either, but around Hawaii there's apparently a little bit of a disturbance. It's not expected to become tropical in nature, but it is expected to cause some problems. So as far as anyone that wants to go fishing or go on a cruise over there, so just be on the lookout. The waters could be a little bit choppy. Other than that, though, that's really all we got for this video here. If you enjoyed this one, you know what to do. Hit that like button. If you've been watching for a while, if you're new, definitely hit that subscribe button. So that way you can get access and notifications to all of my videos. So I do post on here pretty often. And then, of course, hit that share button. But that being said here, I'm going to get out of here. It's been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care and have a good rest of your day.